This is really where we bring the international part into our International Myeloma and Patient and Caregiver Conference. We have a very special panel session happening this afternoon. I think this is probably one of the first times that
we've done this.
These panel sessions are happening. Martine's going to be leading our esteemed panelists from around the globe, and I'm going to let you introduce them, and here we are. We're going to get started.
Thank you. This is so great to have you all here together on the stage because, one of the things that is really cool about the international community is that we do meet on a regular basis, at least once a year in Europe during the EHA, the European Hematology Association Conference. We also meet at the International International Myeloma Foundation working group. We also meet, I'm trying to avoid the acronyms. We have so many acronyms in our world. So the other conference where we meet is the American Society of Hematology that happens every year. So we always make a point of getting together and learning about each other. And actually, I do sit on the board of the International Myeloma Foundation as a board member. I also sit as an observer on the Myeloma Patients Europe board and also participate in their community advisory board events. And, I do meet with Jenny very often at meetings. We're part of the MIF, which is the Myeloma, can't remember what the acronym is. Help me out here. Frontiers, the International Myeloma Frontiers and Frontiers in Myeloma. Thank you. And Haley also is a co-member on the GMAN, which is the Global Myeloma Action Network Advisory Board. So I'm trying to, sort of spare you a lot of the acronyms. So it's so wonderful to have you here. And I'm going to let you introduce yourself because I did mention your name, but I didn't say where you were from specifically. So Dr. Joe, we're going to start with you. You can tell us.
Hi, everybody. Joe McHale, Canadian. I'm going to emphasize that.
Yay!
That is one passport I will never give up. So I'm grateful for that. So privilege of training here in Canada back in the day. I serve as the Chief Medical Officer of the International Myeloma Foundation. I'm a professor at the City of Hope, and I live in Scottsdale, Arizona. It's just a pleasure to be back in the motherland.
Hi, I'm Katie Joyner. I'm the co-CEO of Myeloma Patients Europe. I'm originally from the United States, but I live in Munich, Germany, and I'm really excited to be here today to talk about the work of MP and how we can work together.
And I'm Hayley Beer. I'm from Myeloma Australia, based in Melbourne. I also am a clinical nurse consultant at the Peter MacCallum Cancer Centre, so have clinical and advocacy experience and have a Canadian mother-in-law.
I'm Jenny Ahlstrom. I'm a multiple myeloma patient. I was diagnosed in 2010, and I started the Health Tree Foundation. I'm the CEO and founder of that. And I live in Utah.
Thank you, Jenny. Who here has gone to all the different websites from international organizations, the International Myeloma Foundation, the MMRF, the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation, or Health Tree, Myeloma UK, Myeloma Patients Europe. I mean, we're a very small community, so we know that people do go and seek information because we all work very closely together, and it's really important to create that global community. And this is a great opportunity, as I mentioned earlier this morning, to having the international community of doctors here and everybody joining us. So maybe we're going to start with who we are. What is your core mission? Why do you exist? So maybe we're going to start with you, Katie, at MPE, Myeloma Patients Europe.
Sure, happy to. So MP's core mission is to drive European advocacy through research, education, and collaboration. And we are an umbrella organization, so we have 53 members in 33 countries, including Myeloma Canada. And so we really serve to support our members. Our members are national organizations who are supporting patients and carers every day, and we want to make sure that they have access to the latest information on treatment and care. They have data that they can use in their advocacy efforts or in the work that they do to plan programs or to plan initiatives for patients, and that they have tools and resources they can use that maybe they couldn't build themselves. So a clinical trial search tool or an access atlas that shows the different availabilities of treatments in Europe. So as an umbrella organization, we have the ability to create those innovative tools and to create that network of support to help those organizations do the day-to-day work that they need to be doing to support patients and carers.
Who wants to go next?
So when I was diagnosed, the fight at the time was single versus tandem transplant. And I asked the doctor, show me the data for a patient that looks like me to know how long I would live or to know what would give me the best possible outcome. And nobody could provide that. So our mission at HealthTree is to provide patients and researchers with the tools and the data that they need. So we do have a full set of educational programming. We have, shout out to Cindy here who runs our HealthTree University program. She's also a myeloma patient. We interview myeloma specialists. We've interviewed you before and many others in this room. And then we have community programming, but the most unique thing that we do is we invite patients to join research. And what I mean by that is you can connect your medical records or donate your medical records to a bigger pool so that we can start seeing patterns. And my developer just showed me last night, we are now, we have thousands of patients who are participating, and now we're starting to generate new data, like we can see time to next treatment by line of therapy, and which treatment is most efficacious. And to get to that point, we had to invite patients to participate. They linked their medical records. We cleaned and validated the data because the data coming from the EHR is very messy data. A lot of it is unstructured data, so you have to pull it all together. And then we are now opening that data up in better terms and we're now using AI to do many things on it, but one of which is just to identify fastest cures. So that's primarily what we're working on.
Thank you, ladies first. So Myeloma Australia, very similar, and interesting hearing a lot of what was spoken about this morning. It's very similar to what we do at Myeloma Australia. So we have 20 nurses all around the country. They're part-time and they also work in hospitals to stay clinically relevant, and they run services such as our telephone support line, support groups. They run education days exactly like this and develop different educational resources, update the website, booklets and different things. We also educate health professionals through scientific workshops and clinical education workshops and develop clinical practice guidelines. We have a very similar healthcare system, and lots, as Michelle said this morning, a lot of the drugs are approved in slightly disorganised ways, so we help our maybe not so specialised clinicians understand the best way to treat patients and really work. Our mission is to expertly support Australians living with myeloma while driving progress towards a cure.
Dr. McKell?
Sure. So our vision, a world where every myeloma patient lives life to the fullest, unburdened by the disease. Our mission, that we improve the quality of life of patients while we seek prevention and a cure. So those aren't just little taglines, those are what we've had the privilege of doing now for over 35 years. And so the IMF really, I think of the IMF as sort of the conveners of the Olympics, right? Why are so many records broken at the Olympics? It's because you set a table and you set an atmosphere where everybody can play at their highest level. And so we try to bring patients together. We have over 150 support groups in the US and another 150 support groups around the world. We bring the myeloma experts together. We host what's called the International Myeloma Working Group, about 350 myeloma nerds from around the world. Pretty much all of them are in Toronto right now, filling themselves with maple syrup and Tim Hortons. Yes. We bring together the advocacy community, where there's a couple of things going on in Washington, D.C. these days. And to try and advocate for whether it's policy or other things to try and improve the lives of our patients, and then of course in education. And for those of you who have already shared with me that you're my electronic stalkers and you've seen my videos, we try to do education in multiple different ways. And we feel like if we can bring everybody together, including industry and government, we can have an opportunity to really push the agenda forward in collaboration with all of our wonderful partners around the world. So it's a real privilege to be able to be a part of that kind of organization that sees, brings everybody together. And it's a lot of work, and we've seen, of course, huge progress. You all know I went into myeloma here in Canada when I was in Ottawa doing my internal medicine, decided to do hematology, where most of our patients lived 1, maybe 2 years. That was 30 years ago. And now we anticipate survival to be well over a decade, and for most people over 15 years. So it's really, really remarkable. It's been exciting to be a part of that.
It is. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for sharing with us what you do and who you are at the core. We know the myeloma community from, the perspective of working with patients and patients' organizations as well. But in your, what are the key challenges that you hear from patients when they come to your organizations that you hear mostly from them? Can you share a little bit about, when a new patient joins your organizations, what's on their mind? What do they worry about the most? Jenny, we'll start with you.
Well, first they want to understand the disease because they have no idea what they were just diagnosed with, like me, and probably like all of you. I think next, they want to know what is the very best treatment for me personally that's going to be the most limited in terms of treatment or duration, or the most efficacious. If I have high-risk disease, what are my best options? If I have low-risk disease, do I really have to stay on therapy forever? I think those are some of the key questions. That the biggest searches that we get on our website are about treatment options, because patients want to know, what should I be getting personally? What's going to be my personal cure?
And Katie, did you want to talk a little bit about, the challenges that patients in Europe face, because you represent, a large swath of countries, and there's many differences between some of the countries like France or Spain and Romania and those smaller countries in the Eastern Bloc.
Yep. So one of the challenges that we face in Europe is that there are huge disparities in access to treatment. So we have countries like Martine was saying, Spain and France and Germany, that do quite well and get access often fairly quickly to most of the myeloma medications. But in Central and Eastern Europe, that's not always the case, and especially in former Yugoslavia countries that are outside the EU, they really struggle to get access, certainly to the immunotherapies and the conversations that we'll be having, later today and throughout the week at IMS, but even access to older generic myeloma drugs is really a struggle for them. So we work really closely with them to try to advocate for better access, to work with the pharmaceutical companies, to work with the ministries of health, to demand better access for those patients so that they have more treatment options. But it is really disparate there, as it is, I know, in other parts of the world, in the US and in Australian rural communities that also struggle to get access. But we have a completely different experience for a patient who lives in Macedonia versus a patient who lives in Germany. And so when we have our meetings like this, we really feel that in the room when patients are asking questions about CAR T and other patients are saying, this is science fiction, we will never see this in our lifetime. So how we as a patient organization can provide that guidance and support for those organizations who are really working hard at a national level to overcome those challenges, while also making sure patients with access to those treatments have the best information to make the decisions that Jenny was talking about. When you've been diagnosed, what do you do? So we try as hard as we can with our limited resources and staff to do the best to meet all those needs.
Haley, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I think
From Down Under?
I agree with everything that's been said so far, but I think there's still the most common reaction that we see when people are first diagnosed with myeloma is, what is this? The awareness is still so low, and we've in recent years had a very prominent news sports commentator, newsreader, be diagnosed with myeloma and be generous enough to be public with his diagnosis, and that the uplift we've seen in the awareness, excuse me, in our community has been phenomenal, and that very quickly followed by the president of one of the biggest Australian rules football clubs. He was then diagnosed, and then he decided to stand beside Sandy and go public, which, you never wish a diagnosis upon anyone, but we're very grateful to both those gentlemen for being brave enough to step forward with their personal experiences, because the opportunities that you get from these people, I'll give a quick example that we wanted to do some filming on the most famous football field in Melbourne, and we were told, it's $3,000 an hour and there's no bookings for 6 months. Sandy said, hold the phone, called up, what time do you want next week for free? So there are lots, and it's really a shame that it takes a person of profile to get that attention, but we're grabbing it with both hands and taking it as far as we can go. But yeah, and Sandy's, one of his most famous quotes has been, we want to make the invisible visible, because, looking around this room, I couldn't tell you who has myeloma and who doesn't. It's such an invisible disease. So we're really trying to shine the spotlight on it, because that's how you get, the focus, the funding, the research, then kind of follows after that.
And Dr. Michelle, do you want to talk a little bit about the challenges in some of the communities in the U.S.? I know you're very much involved in the Black African community.
No, and I think so many things have been said so beautifully, and everybody comes with a different angle, everybody comes with a different expectation, but if there's one common thread between literally every patient we interact with, is that even if they can't enunciate it, is their desire to be empowered. Whether it's to understand the disease better, to be able to get better access, to be able to speak to their doctor about myeloma. Some of our patients know more about myeloma than their doctors do, it seems. And I can say that as a doctor. And so we've really tried to look at matching to what the needs of that community and individual are with the resources that they need. And so we've created, and I'll be very brief about this because I know I won't cover it when I do the Myeloma 101, but myeloma is twice as common in any of us, including myself and Craig and a few others in this room, who are of African descent. And yet right now in the United States, outcomes are terrible. So a black man or a black woman diagnosed today is expected to live half as long as the same aged white man or white woman. A lot of that has to do with general health, and a lot of it has to do with myeloma-specific phenomenon. And so the IMF wants to, as I mentioned in our vision, that every patient lives life to the fullest unburdened by the disease, independent of their race, ethnicity, geography. And so we've really tried to look at individuals whose outcomes has been inferior, typically people living very rural areas, individuals of African descent, Latino Americans, and really try to structure a program and a set of resources that would be specific to them. I mean, Michael and Robin Toohey, who you'll meet later, who work with us at the IMF, the three of us just came back from Jamaica this weekend. We were in Jamaica, that's outside the US, of course, but trying to help the needs there. It's one of the very few times I've ever given a talk as a myeloma doctor where the other speaker is a surgeon. It's a surgical disease in Jamaica, because by the time people get discovered, they have spinal cord compromise or have broken bones, because it's never detected earlier on. So it makes us appreciate the depth of what we have. And so our Empower program was built to engage the community in general, raise awareness. We go to churches, fraternities, sororities, barbershops, you name it, to raise awareness about myeloma within the Black community, within the Latino American community, but then also to help our primary care doctors learn how to make the diagnosis. Because most of you could tell a story today. Almost every one of you with myeloma will tell me that it took a while to make the diagnosis. I mean, very rarely we pick it up incidentaloma, as I call it, but typically it takes a long time. That time is even longer in certain populations, so we want to shorten that time. And then lastly, to really enhance the care of our patients, give them an opportunity to have greater access. And when we shine the light on that health inequity, then it gives us an opportunity to find ways to even the lines, as it were, and ensure that everybody has that opportunity for both the education and indeed the access to care.
Thank you. Now I want to shift to collaboration, and I want to start with you, Katie, because with the Community Advisory Board, I want you to talk a little bit about it, but it's something that, to me, when I first joined, thought was really very important and very interesting, because as a Canadian, our healthcare system is very much like the European healthcare system: public healthcare, reimbursement through, sort of evaluation, health technology assessment. But then we sit on top of the U.S. And very different healthcare system, but a lot of different or similarities in terms of treatment approaches. So for us in Canada, collaboration is a must. It's not something nice to do. We have to collaborate. So tell us a little bit about the MP and the activities that you do to bring collaboration together.
Sure. So, yeah, I'm happy to speak about the CAB. So the Community Advisory Board is a program that we launched, I think, in 2019. And it was modeled after a lot of incredible advocacy work from the HIV and the CML communities. And essentially, pharmaceutical companies often invite patient advocates to join their meetings to hear, they set the agenda and we answer their questions. And so really smart patient advocates had a great idea to kind of flip that around and say, we'd like to invite you to our meeting. We're gonna set the agenda and we're gonna tell you what we think, and you're gonna answer our questions. And so by doing this, we could convene a really productive meeting between the industry representatives who can speak about their access plans, who can speak about their clinical pipeline development, who can speak about their patient engagement or patient evidence plans. And then we invite expert patient advocates from countries across Europe and also Canada, because of the healthcare system, to speak about their perspective on access, on what companies should be doing when they're designing their clinical trials, where they should launch those clinical trials, the kind of data that we will need when we're going to HTA bodies to advocate for reimbursement and for access. So, through the collaboration between several different patient organization leaders like Martine and across Europe, and then the companies who, and I see several people in the back who have had to sit through these meetings with us, and we appreciate that, who have brought together not just the patient engagement folks, but people from across the organization who can really share, what they're planning to do in myeloma and what they're planning to do for patients across Europe. We have these really incredible meetings where we are able to speak freely, to have confidential conversations, and to identify ways that we can work together as a community to help improve how patients are educated, where the trials are located, where they're designed. It's a lot of work, and it takes a long time to kind of move the needle, but I think for us and the work that we're doing at a European level, it really gives us an opportunity and a platform to raise those voices from our different patient organizations and to advocate with the right people in the room to say, we demand better and we want to work with you in this way to help achieve that. So that's one way that we've been able to collaborate with a lot of our community. And I think it also shows from the larger oncology and hematology and disease space, we learned to run our CABs from other organizations and other diseases who were generous enough to teach us, and we've since taught other patient organizations in Europe how to run their CABs. So it's also a nice, I think, example of cross-disease work as well. I forgot. Haley and we've worked with Myeloma Australia to tell them this is how we've set up our CAB, this is how we train our members. If you want to do this, we'll help you out. So it's a great way to kind of share that.
We had our first successful meeting 2 weeks ago. Thanks, Kate.
Wonderful. That's excellent. And Haley, Australia is a beautiful country. I've never been. I'd love to go there, but you're far away from a lot of places. And how do you integrate collaboration in what you do with either some of the Asia Pacific countries or European or Canadian? Because a lot of your health technology assessment and evaluation is very similar to the Canadian one. We've actually imported many of your Australian health technology experts to Canada.
Wow, that's where they all went. That's why we've actually just been through a first. Yes, I'm thinking about this because we are very isolated in Australia. We're very far away from everywhere. No one, we didn't get an IMS meeting bid. We're too far away. And also, we're not an attractive place for a lot of pharmaceutical companies to take their clinical trials. So it is a challenge for us to try and attract, the trials, and our equally right now our local investigators are also having trouble getting their research ideas funded because similar problem, we're just too small a population, too far away. But we do buddy up with I have to mention our neighbours in New Zealand who their drug access is nowhere near as good as ours. So they're members of our scientific advisory group and we try to help them where we can. But obviously these things are really challenging, and our clinicians have connections with Asia Pacific, and we very closely connected to the Australian Myeloma and Related Diseases Registry Group, who also have an Asia Pacific arm. So I think we could do a lot more, though, in terms of collaboration. But one thing that we have recently achieved internally is that, our HTA, or Health Technology Assessment processes, have not been, or until last year, had not been reviewed for 30 years. So you can imagine the progress in that time, and the system of evaluating new therapies was not fit for purpose. Right now, we've had our government committee positively recommend cilta-cel for patients in fifth line, so not great, but still a positive recommendation. And we're now 16 months waiting for the negotiation between the government and the company for that to actually become available to patients. So the country acknowledges that those wait times are far too long, and were successful in getting a roundtable meeting with the committee that assesses drug applications. We were the first organisation to successfully collaborate with them, and we had a great conversation about the challenges from the patient perspective, the clinician's perspective, and their perspective. There are challenges in every direction, and now we've got a start of a pathway forward to help improve that. So I think internally, not internationally, but internally, that has been a good collaboration success recently.
Wonderful. I may want to talk to you about that process. I want to go to the collaboration. You're both representing two different American organizations, myeloma organization. We know that myeloma doesn't care, what country you come from. How do you, the International Myeloma Foundation, and Health Tree collaborate, and how do you bridge, sort of that relationship with patients, because they don't see the difference when they have myeloma? You want to start, Jenny?
As a patient getting diagnosed when I did, and having kind of a hypothesis to go at it a different way, I actually did not see a lot of collaboration between organizations when I was diagnosed. I'm glad that's changing. I decided that we would just fill gaps because I was not welcomed with open arms by any means. Yelik Baru was the former CEO of the IMF. He's a dear friend of mine, an amazing person. And we have decided there are certain things that we are just not going to do that the IMF is doing really well. So they run wonderful support groups. We have listed all of their support groups on our website and are happy to have that collaboration in place. And a lot of the support groups have welcomed our members to come and talk about Health Tree Cure Hub. So I'm super happy to see it change, because as a patient, I didn't really understand it, why there would be that kind of tension. And so it's wonderful to see it change. And, we were always open to collaboration.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully said, Jenny. Thank you so much for saying that, because it really is important, because I think from a patient's perspective, I think, why is it, is this really Coke and Pepsi? Is this really, second cup and Tim Hortons? Like, do you have to fight together? And it's not, we all want the same thing at the end of the day. And I think it's a question of looking at, what are the areas that the IMF is really focused on, areas that Health Tree is focused on, MMRF may be focused on, and allow people to succeed and thrive in their particular area. To allow ultimately the patient to have a benefit. When I think of the importance of collaboration at the IMF, this is sort of like the centerpiece, or the I in IMF International is hopefully what we'll see a bit this week at the International Myeloma Society. The concept of creating the International Myeloma Working Group was to say there are things that you can't do individually that you can only do corporately. So if, great medical institutions that we have, like here in Canada, Princess Margaret Hospital, in the United States, Mayo Clinic and Dana-Farber and Cleveland Clinic, all these great places that we know of, there are things that no one institution can really do by itself. It doesn't see enough patients to answer certain questions. It can't have expertise in every area. Let's bring everybody together, right? So we're trying to figure out, for example, what are all these unusual side effects that we're getting to manage with CAR T-cell therapy and with bispecific antibodies. It's hard for any one doctor, any one center to get it. But if we bring information together a bit like how Jenny's trying to bring pooling large data information to gain answer certain questions, we're trying to also do that sort of on the research side as well, saying, okay, how do we figure out this side effect that we can't really understand? Why are people having this neurological challenge after a CAR T-cell therapy? What really is going on, and how is that going to happen? Because, again, this is the hold hands, sing kumbaya moment, but, we can't, there are things that just cannot be done by either one group or one organization, frankly, or one institution that we have to work together on. And that's how we actually, and I think Katie said it beautifully, we're now actually being emulated by our colleagues in, at least in the hematology world, in lymphoma and leukemia and others. They look to us and say, oh, you have this international collaborative effort that we don't really have. And they look to us with a little bit of jealousy, and then hopefully it spurns and inspires them to do a similar thing.
Jenny, you want to add something?
I just wanted to agree with what you were saying on the data side. Like, if we're going to get to a myeloma cure, no one institution typically has enough data to come up with the answers. That data has to be aggregated and collected across multiple institutions. And if you think about it, I don't know if that's the case here in Canada, but in the United States, the average patient is being seen at 3 different academic centers. Those are centers, a general oncology center and then an academic center and somewhere else probably. So those centers cannot share the data without a data sharing agreement between those institutions. Those are very hard to put into place. They typically take years of negotiation to figure out. So if the brilliant physicians do not have access to the data that they need in order to cure us, then why aren't we helping with that effort? Why aren't we leaning in and saying, open up my anonymous data to everyone? I don't care where that academic physician is. I don't care if they're a junior person or a senior person. They can have as many papers as they can have written 300 papers or 2. But if they're going to help cure me and come up with a model that works, help me do that,
I agree. I think, it is our data, and we have the right to share it. And I see it as currency. Data is kind of gold. And when you go to the bank and you put your money in the bank, it's research gold for sure. And you want them to invest it appropriately, but you want it to grow and answer questions. And I find it very frustrating when you cannot share your data. If you go from one institution to another, what do you mean? You phone your doctor and say, can you share my data with me? Oh, no, I can't. And well, fax is the archaic. So let's move on to advocacy. Obviously, we advocate for a patient population. We advocate for change in the healthcare system, for access to better care, better treatments. I want to ask you to share maybe an example. I know that you jumped the gun on that one, but that's okay. That's okay. Maybe you have another example, but you shared with us a really exciting example of how your efforts, Haley, in Australia has changed or is paving the way for change in health policy. Katie, is there an example from Europe where you want to share?
Yeah, I'll share an example recently from Poland. So, maybe just to set the stage, we do a lot of European level advocacy, but that is slow moving and it takes a long time to see kind of specific results from that. So it's nice to see national examples of where we can really come together to create a change that's meaningful for patients in a quick turnaround. So a few months ago, one of our members in Poland had contacted us to say that they were having trouble accessing a certain dosage of generic lenalidomide, and they were receiving a lot of inquiries from patients asking why they couldn't get access to this. And so they contacted us to say, do you know anything about this? Why would this be happening? So we first surveyed our members to see if this was a larger problem across Europe with supply chains or just availability, or if it was specific to Poland. And so after doing that survey, we found out it was just specific to Poland. So we started speaking to the generic companies and the pharmaceutical companies to understand why Poland isn't accessing this generic drug that they've usually had access to and shouldn't be a problem. And the simplest explanation was basically the oversight for the pregnancy prevention program was creating a lot of administrative burden for the clinicians and the companies, and some of the companies were just pulling out of the market. They were like, this isn't really a valuable place for us to market our drugs, so we're just not going to make it available at the detriment of these patients who obviously desperately need this particular dosage of lenalidomide. So what we did is we worked with our members in Poland, we worked with the pharmaceutical and the generic companies, and and our members spoke to them to kind of understand what the challenge was, and they got together to lobby the Ministry of Health to say, you have to figure out a solution here and work with the companies to get them back into the market because patients aren't accessing these drugs. And so through that coordinated effort and us kind of bringing the right people and the right stakeholders into the conversation, they were able to find a solution, get the right dosage back into the market, and it was resolved in a few months and patients had access again. So that's kind of a single example of MP, providing kind of that platform to bring the right people to the conversation, to understand the challenge, get some data to understand how big the challenge is, and then bring the right people together to figure out a solution. It doesn't usually happen that quickly, but this was a good example of how we could really make a difference for those patients who for months really were unsure about when they were going to get access to their medication.
Well, congratulations, that's great for patients. Dr. Mikkel, in the US right now, there's lots of issues in terms of access to cancer therapies. I know that you're very busy at the International Myeloma Foundation and advocating on the Hill. Do you want to share about the activities that you do there?
Sure, yeah. So actually, this is a really good week for it. We have a big effort on this week where we brought together about 30 patients to come into DC and to advocate to their representatives, a bit like your members of parliament, as it were. And it's actually amazing how much that patient voice carries when we have these conversations with our legislators. It's really, really important. I'll give you just two quick examples of areas of particular importance to us at the IMF, and I think to the myeloma community. Is the first is this concept of an oral parity law. Sort of in the way that a lot of funding has happened historically in the US, and honestly, to a certain degree here in Canada as well, there's been this distinction between IV drugs, or drugs that are given IV or subcutaneously, and drugs that are given as pills. That the branding of chemotherapy is only landed on the IV and the subcutaneous, and not the pill version. And so coverage often is not there for the pill version. And so patients end up having huge amount of copays and paying a lot of extra money to get drugs that are orally administered. And so we've been working, and we're working states through state, and many of the states have now adopted this concept that whether the drug is given by IV or given subcutaneously or given by pill, if this is a cancer treatment, it should be covered. And the second is this notion of capping off how much the copay ultimately can be. And I know it sounds like a lot of money, but it was a huge step forward for us in the US that was adopted this past year, where patients, whether it was lenalidomide or other drugs that they might be on, the Revlimid they may be on, that whatever their patient copay was, it had to be capped for a calendar year at $2,000. Because we had some patients that were paying several $100s every month, and it was going into the tens of $1,000s over the course of a year. And so the IMF was very central to both of those processes. And that's because you build a relationship, you have patients' voice at the center. And that's really how advocacy ultimately can be done. And lastly, we did it with a lot of collaborative effort. So it wasn't just the IMF standing alone. We're working with a whole group of other cancer-related organizations. And that's ultimately how I think we can influence change at the governmental level.
Jenny, is there anything you would want to share from HealthTree?
Well, we don't do a lot of policy advocacy work, but I think on topics like that, or topics like telehealth, you looked at how COVID, everybody started doing these telehealth visits. They're very easy to do, and sometimes the doctor doesn't need to physically inspect you when you go in, right? So making that available on a permanent basis is policy advocacy that we would like to get involved in, because some of those issues, and the same thing, I mean, it doesn't matter how this drug is administered, it all needs to be covered.